there is a lot of inherent bias, both in the system in some subspecialties, but also among that healthcare team. The classic example is that I routinely, during residency, would walk into a room and say, "Hi, I'm Dr. Dhvani." And they'd be on their phone and they'd go, "Oh, hang out, gotta go. The nurse just walked in." And I don't mind being called nurse. Nurses are amazing. But also, my male colleagues never got mistaken for a nurse. The male nurses frequently got called doctor. Primary care providers, teachers, we are all on the front line when it comes to failed social policies. We see the impacts of food insecurity and poverty and kids who are uninsured, kids who are dying from vaccine-preventable illnesses, child abuse. All of these things are fixable issues that unfortunately we just haven't fixed with social policy. I don't think I would actively discourage anyone from pursuing a career in medicine, but I do think you really have to go in with your eyes wide open about what this job is. The cliche is that we go in thinking, "I just want to help people." But if that's the only reason, it's going to be hard because medicine is so much more than that. And especially nowadays with the way everything's changing, both in
medicine,
law, friendship. This is Dr. Long and Lawyer Nik. You're listening to the Medico-Legal Brief.
one doctor, one lawyer, and a whole lot of gray area. Welcome back to another episode of the Medico-Legal Brief here with Dr. Long and Lawyer Nik. Today's episode is extra special because we have a special guest with us, Dr. Dhvani. She's super special because we've known her for forever, and we have such a success story that we want to discuss further with Dr. Dhvani.
Dr. Dhvani, I am super happy that you are here with us. We all go way, way back. And as far as women in medicine, you have been one of the individuals that both me and my wife look up to. So we're happy to have this conversation with you, and I'm ready to get into it.
Hi, I'm Dhvani. I am a pediatrician, and yes, somehow have known these guys for almost 20 years now, which is wild.
But you're being a little modest. You're more than just a pediatrician. What did you go into fellowship for?
My fellowship is in child abuse pediatrics, and I love my job. I love talking about it. I love what I do.
So kind of run us through the educational process. I think our viewers know a lot about how we have to do 4 years of medical school and then a minimum of 3 years of residency. What does that look like for you once you get into pediatrics?
It is pretty much the same. I did the 4 years of medical school, 3 years of pediatrics residency, and then decided I wanted to do a 3-year fellowship in child abuse pediatrics before then finally being done with training. Exciting news, though. The ABP just announced that they're going to shorten PEDS fellowships to 2 years. It's one of the many efforts to combat the pediatric workforce shortage that we're experiencing in this country. They're trying to make it a little bit easier for people to become pediatric subspecialists, which means we get to now have a 2-year fellowship pathway, and it's going to be really interesting to see what that does.
So what does that look like for training? Is that going to cut out a specific part of your training? Is it less inpatient, less outpatient? What does that look like?
It's going to depend on the subspecialty, but generally speaking, the biggest chunk that has been not eliminated, but affected by that change is going to be the scholarly work requirement. Part of why all PEDS fellowships were 3 years is because they all had to have a minimum of 12 months of research, and you had to have a scholarly work product at the end. And they, with this change, are letting programs have the flexibility to create 2-year pathways that are clinically oriented. So you don't have to have that scholarly work requirement. Obviously, there will still be that as a requirement of training. You have to learn how to read the literature, but you don't necessarily have to have like a manuscript or a grant or something at the end of it.
I'm going to take it back a little bit because as the only non-medical professional on the podcast, y'all going back and forth is like a foreign language to me. I want to take it back to college. Obviously, we all went to the University of Texas at Austin, and that's where we met. When you went into college, did you already know that you wanted to become a doctor? Was that what your passion, your career goal was, or did it just happen while you were going through school?
Yes and no. Going into college, I, like many Asian children, had some parental pressure to pursue a career in medicine, but really thought that I wanted to go into education. I wanted to be a teacher. I did a lot of my volunteer work and community service in both high school and in undergrad, working with children in schools. That was really what I thought I was going to do. I also had some interest in politics and government, but the experience that solidified it for me was when I was in undergrad and I was part of a mentorship program where we worked with kids at a local charter school. I had a girl that I was paired with who had bad asthma, and she was uninsured, and her family, in order to get her medical care, would travel to Mexico. They would often have to leave because either she was sick or because they needed medication. She was missing a lot of school and starting to fall behind because she wasn't insured. And it was one of those moments for me where I realized that as important as education is, and it is hugely important, and teachers are some of my favorite people on this planet, but you need your health in order to learn. And so I thought about pediatrics and how it was this perfect blend of all the things I loved, advocacy and education, but also being able to help kids be healthy.
And I think that's kind of on point because even in your career now, you are still finding other opportunities to advocate and educate. The teaching is second nature to you. But for all the individuals that are in college and trying to determine whether or not they want to be a lawyer, be a doctor, or go do something completely different, what year was it that you decided to make that switch? Because I'm assuming you had to arrange your coursework appropriately to put yourself in the best position applying to med school. What year did that take place and how hard was it to pivot?
That's a good question. Because parents always wanted me to pursue medicine. There's no real pre-med track at UT, but I was pre-med and doing a lot of those requirements regardless. I double majored at UT. I was a biology major like Long, but I also double majored in Plan 2, which is a liberal arts honors program. And I loved it because it gave me a ton of flexibility and I got to take some really interesting classes like art history and music theory and things that I wouldn't have otherwise been able to do if I had just been straight science pre-med. But the pivot wasn't hard for me because I was always working towards both. And really the final decision came about my second or third year of college.
Along your journey, was there any particular barriers or maybe people or mentors who didn't feel like that was a route that you should pursue? Obviously, your parents wanted you to, but anyone along the way that deterred you from pursuing medicine?
Not really. In a lot of ways, I was lucky because I didn't know a lot of doctors. I am the first doctor in my family, really. I didn't have a ton of doctors around me. And so in some ways, it was hard, but it was also nice because I didn't really know what I was getting into in a lot of ways. Many doctors will tell you that other doctors were the ones who deterred them. And I definitely didn't have that because I didn't know a lot of doctors.
You and me both. We definitely got lucky in that way. Do you feel like you hold the same sentiment as these older doctors? Do you feel like medicine is something you would deter younger generations not to pursue?
I don't think deter. I don't think I would actively discourage anyone from pursuing a career in medicine, but I do think you really have to go in with your eyes wide open about what this job is. I think many of us, the cliche is that we go in thinking, I just want to help people. And it's true, we do. But if that's the only reason, it's going to be hard because medicine is so much more than that. And especially nowadays with the way everything's changing, both in medicine and in the country, there's a lot more that you're doing. And so what I often tell people is, and I'm sure Long, you've probably been told this too, and maybe even you, Nick, but if there is something else that you could imagine yourself doing and being happy doing, then probably do that. But if there's not, because I do believe that medicine is in a lot of ways truly a calling, if this is what you love, then absolutely, it's a great job.
And we've talked about that before on this podcast. When people take a soft approach to graduate school, whether it's med school, law school, going to go get the MBA, it can't just be a side hobby. It can't just be a little passion project. You need to actually go all in and be as involved as possible. I've mentioned in law school, you have to learn to love the law if you don't already love the law. That's pretty appropriate for doctors as well. If you're not already going in loving medicine and loving the future state of your career, which is helping people, doing your residency, doing fellowships, internships, working in an ER, you're creating a path that is going to almost be kind of a one-way path for the rest of your career. Dr. Long has explained to our listeners that once you pick that path, it's pretty hard to transition, where you can't really transition from pediatrics to be orthopedic surgeon. You're stuck where you're at. So you're signing up for the long run, and you have to be prepared for that.
Absolutely.
My next question is, for those out there who maybe don't necessarily believe how hard medical school is, can you support or deny how much studying you actually did during your 4 years of medical school?
Long, you remember from being in class with me, I am an auditory learner. And so I, in a lot of ways, got really lucky. If I came to class and listened and paid attention, information stuck in my brain. I didn't have to do a ton of extra reading. That being said, medical school definitely pushed me beyond anything ever. And it is really like the analogy everyone says of drinking out of a fire hose. It's just so much information. But I still think we had a lot of fun. I made a lot of great friends. I did a lot of extracurriculars. I was able to volunteer and see my family and travel a little bit too. But you have to be more intentional about it.
I'm going to take a pretty quick and hard turn here, because the thing that I'm constantly thinking about is I saw a lot of female colleagues who had kids during medical school. You just talked about how much studying we did. Was that something on your mind? And remind me, when did you have your first?
Yeah, I did not have my kids until fellowship, which in a lot of ways I say was the perfect timing. I had friends who had kids and babies during medical school, and not having gone through it myself, I can only imagine how difficult that would be, just in terms of the sheer volume of studying, not having control over your schedule. There's just so many things like that. Obviously, people do it, and there are programs that are supportive, and even more so now probably than back when we were in school. It's gotten better. But my kids I had during fellowship, and it was much, much easier in a lot of ways, because fellowship, especially in the field that I'm in, as you can imagine, not as intense in a lot of ways in terms of huge patient panels and working nights and days. It's a lot more predictable. It's a lot more like a 9 to 5 with some weekend and overnight call. And so it was a lot easier for me. But I had both of my kids during fellowship, which now that I look back, I don't know how I did that. But it's just one of those things that is hard, and you just power through and then look back and you're like, hey, I did that really hard thing.
Now, I have several questions that branch off that. Obviously, I know you, and I want to bring the audience into not necessarily your personal life, but the personal support you have. So your husband, an amazing guy. How was it going through medical school and going through fellowship with the kiddos, with the husband? I know that for a time in your life, he was actually overseas for quite a bit. How did he play a role in that whole process, balancing becoming a doctor, balancing having kids, and just having the support of the man you love?
Yes. Shout out to him, because he is the best. I think about this pretty often, and interestingly, recently had a medical student rotating with me who is in a similar situation. We had a long talk about this, and it really made me pause and think about my whole experience. A couple of things. One, that whole time that he was overseas was actually my first 2 years of medical school. But if I had to go back now and pick a time to do long distance, that's it. Because those first 2 years of medical school, your preclinical years typically, are insanely busy. It's a lot of courses and lectures and books and reading and studying and anatomy lab. Most medical students, those first 2 years, don't make great partners. I think about a lot of my friends who came into medical school in long-term relationships like I had. Most of them didn't make it through that period, because you just don't have the time. And unfortunately, it's hard to make a person or a relationship your priority when you're trying to just cover that much ground and that much new information. For me, in a lot of ways, that long distance, though it was insanely difficult, was actually perfect timing, because yes, not only was he overseas, but he was in a situation where he didn't often have internet. And this was like pre-FaceTime. We would Skype every month or so, but we really did not get to talk that much. And it was hard. The other really huge benefit of that is that We are high school sweethearts. And unlike one of the challenges that a lot of couples who start dating really young is that they don't really spend enough time apart to grow into their own. And we did because of that experience. We really had to figure out who we were by ourselves while still being in a relationship. It was hard, but he's always been incredibly supportive. And then with the kids was really, really nice because by the time he was back and we had the kids, his job had a lot more flexibility. He had a better paternity leave than I had maternity leave. And that's awful, but it was really nice for us because we just had a lot of support. Also, because we were in fellowship, we were back home and near family. We made sure that when all of that happened, we were surrounded by people who could help us. And yeah, couldn't have done it without the village, but it was fun.
Was there ever any struggle between households, priorities, chores? If we're looking at a very traditional couple with kids, we tend to see that no matter what the female partner is doing, what sort of career they're choosing, they still have to come home and do a lot of that traditional housekeeping. I imagine that that was not the same for you guys, and curious, how did you communicate that? How was that discussed, or was it just known and understood?
I don't know that it was ever a true discussion we had. You guys know him. He's great. He just has always been super hands-on and involved, and he cleans and he does the dishes. He doesn't cook so much, but he'll do all of that. We already had a system where he was doing a lot. Now, with that being said, I also say all the time that I married one of the good ones. Even with an incredibly supportive partner, I'm still doing more of the work. I look at my colleagues and some of my male colleagues who are pediatricians. They're wonderful people who love kids and they're super hands-on with their own kids, but they'll tell you that their wives did the majority of the work when their kids were little, and still that way. When it comes to stuff with the kids, again, he was so helpful, but I was breastfeeding and I was pumping and I was making all the doctor's appointments and making sure everyone had the right sized clothes. And I know 3 steps in advance when someone's about to outgrow something and we need to make sure we have all the school supply. Like all of that is still mom. And it doesn't have to be. I do think that it's important for couples to talk about how they divide the labor and making sure that people are supporting and contributing and being true partners. I'm really lucky because there's a lot that I don't touch and don't do. And my kids even know there's certain things and they're like, that's a daddy job. And I'm like, yeah, it is.
Now, you had good support at home. You had good support in your village, in your community, with your family, with your hubby. When it comes to getting pregnant during something like fellowship, what is the kind of career training response from your peers, from those that are above you, from people that are teaching you? How do they respond to it? And what resources or time off were you allocated where you could still pursue your goal, but also figure out how to be a mom?
One of the huge benefits of me being in pediatrics is I was surrounded, like all of my coworkers, my leaders, everyone, they were people who understood parenthood and understood kids. So I really didn't struggle a lot with having support. We actually found out that we were pregnant with our first at the end of residency. So I had matched for fellowship, but I hadn't started fellowship. And I found out I was pregnant. And I thought, oh gosh, now I'm going to have to tell them that I'm having a baby and taking maternity leave within the first 6 months of starting fellowship. And they were nothing but supportive. My program director at the time was just effusive and so helpful. And she sent me all kinds of information, and my co-fellows gave me tips about daycares. I had so many people who were insanely supportive and helpful. And the GME policy at the time, 6 or 8 weeks of time off. There's rules, right, from the ACGME about the maximum time that you can have off without extending fellowship or without extending your training. But my program was really smart and intentional about it. That research time I was talking about, we did some of that where I did my maternity leave and then I had research time right after that. So I could be working, but I could be working from home. And that was nice. And I didn't have to go into the office as frequently just for like meetings or things like that. I could still be at home more and ease back in. And so that was really nice. And then when I had my second, I was also a fellow. She was a little bit less planned. And I was like, oh gosh, now I'm going to have to tell them that I am once again taking maternity leave. And they were still amazing about it. And so I was really lucky, but that's why we love pediatrics and women in leadership, because moms get it.
So during that time you're transitioning, did you feel any external pressure, like you were kind of behind the eight ball, you were falling behind your peers, there was a lot to make up, and just that pressure of the career coming at you while you're sitting there trying to give birth, essentially?
Definitely, that was something I felt. And unfortunately, something that until probably very recently, I haven't gotten better about, but it's inherent in medicine because of the kind of people who go into medicine, and probably law too. We feel like if we're not doing the most, then we're not doing enough. It took that experience for me to take a step back and realize I don't have to compare myself to other people. I did what I could and I did what I could handle. There's definitely that element of trying to compare yourself to other people, feeling like you're not doing enough, other people are more productive or have more publications or all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, for me, I knew what was important for me, and that was my family, and that was going to be my priority. I just keep reminding myself that it's okay, that I didn't do all that. But that being said, I still did stuff. I didn't say this earlier, but I got a whole ass master's while I was in training. I got a master's in education while I was in fellowship. That was a huge chunk too of what I was doing during maternity leave, is my master's coursework, which was fun.
And how long does it take to get a master's in education while you're trying to do a fellowship?
The master's in education was a 2-year program. My fellowship program was really supportive of fellows trying to obtain an advanced degree. And so we'd had fellows before me who had gotten a master's of science or a master's in public health or something like that. Because I had always been interested in education and wanted to be a teacher, I thought a master's in education would be great. The fellowship was really good at structuring our program so that I had time during downtimes, during lulls and clinical things. I could work on master's stuff. And then I still worked at night and on weekends on some of that, but it was doable.
I kind of want to run the conversation back to having kids during your training. You said you're one of the lucky few who really had a supportive team around you. But what are your thoughts on a lot of other specialties who do not have that sort of support? And how do women deal with that? From my own colleagues, I know a lot of them were very afraid of having kids, so they put it off for many years and sometimes wait till they're beyond maybe their fertile years and it becomes an issue, or even ones that try to hide it for as long as possible. What are you seeing and what are your thoughts?
I wish that wasn't people's experience, but I think it is. And I imagine it is in other fields as well. But I don't really feel like I have a great answer to that question. It's hard. And I can only imagine having to do that without the support that I had at work. Obviously, people do all the time, so it happens, but you just then have to figure out ways to create a village. There's no shame in hiring a nanny. There's no shame in getting a night doula or using daycare or any of those things. And then I also think that it's important that you give yourself some grace as a parent. We all naturally want to do a good job, and we hold ourselves to a really high standard, but sometimes it's better to just have something done than to have it done perfectly. The example I always give is when my husband folds the children's laundry, inevitably things will not be turned right side out. He'll just fold things when they're inside out. And he will usually mix up at least one pair of pajamas. Somebody's will end up in the wrong closet. And I know that there's a lot of women, especially, who really struggle with that control aspect. And you have to be willing to give yourself grace and also give your partner grace and just say, like, okay, it's going to get done and it's not going to be me that does it. And that's okay. And however they do it is fine. I'm so grateful that I had the support that I have.
And the control piece, not a woman thing only. My husband hangs his clothes the opposite direction. And I think he does it on purpose at this point. But like everything is supposed to point towards the left. He hangs it so it points to the right. Very annoying.
I'm glad we all are living the same life because it's crazy. Nik, you're definitely the one who's mixing up all the baby clothes. I already know.
I was definitely about to comment on that, where I couldn't do it without my wife because, yes, everything that you had described, it's to a T. I can be an amazing father, but do I know the pediatrician's number by heart? Absolutely not. Do I know when her next appointment is? I have no clue. I rely on my wife to just guide me and tell me where I need to be, when I need to be there, and what I need to do to make sure that our daughter is raised successfully. So that resonates with me a ton. But as a pediatrician, as somebody who deals with children, as somebody who has a big old family, how do you approach work-life balance in such a prestigious career with a lot of different moving pieces?
I have a planner, a physical paper planner. I use it because I need to externalize. That is something I struggled with executive functioning, I'd say, even before medical school. But then after becoming a mom, that definitely made it even worse. There's just too many tabs open in my brain at all times. And so I developed a lot of systems for externalizing. I have a paper planner and I write everything down and I make sure that I know not just what's happening this week, but next week and next month and 3 months from now, because I try to stay on top of it. I try to do things early. Work-life balance, again, there's other things that I just go, okay, these are the things that are non-negotiable for me. I will make sure that I am at my kids' birthday parties. And some of that can happen because you get to pick when the birthday party happens. You can work around your schedule. And that is one thing I love about my job is I do have a ton of scheduling flexibility. And I can definitely make most things work. And then I also have just boundaries. I come home and I put my phone away and that's it. And then we're done. I try to make sure that I physically cannot access my work email during time that I'm with my kids because otherwise it'll suck me back in. There are things like that that you can do that help maintain those boundaries and that work-life balance. But yeah, it can be hard.
Dr. Long has actually explained this to me before. And with him being in family medicine, I'm wondering if it's the same because I feel like pediatrics is a sister to family medicine. It's just you're focusing on the kiddos. But is it the same instance in which you have to plan out a year ahead and make sure that you're taking your vacations appropriately and really leaning into what your PTO should be?
Listen, that's a long peculiarity, I will say. I do not do that. That is straight long craziness. No, I'm just kidding. You definitely do have to do some planning, and it depends on the size of the group that you're working in and where you are in your practice setting. My last job, when it was just me and one other person, you did have to plan out further in advance because if I didn't request that time off, well, then the other person was probably going to do it. There's the benefit with a smaller group. You can just have face-to-face conversations with people and like, hey, I'll swap you this for that, and this is what I want to do. I'm in a good sized group now, and so it really makes life easy from a scheduling perspective. Luckily, if I didn't plan out in advance and I need to take PTO, I can just find somebody to swap and cover. We can manage.
Now, did the confidence to lay down boundaries and expectations, is that something that's more recent in your career and in your life? Or did you take that approach when you were new to becoming a doctor and starting work?
No, that's definitely new. I didn't know to do that earlier on. I kind of blurred those boundaries a lot. And especially during residency, I'd come home and I'd be logging into the VPN and checking on my patients and doing those things because I just couldn't let it go. That's because we care, right? And it's a good thing. But also becoming a mom, I had to develop those boundaries. There was somebody else at home that needed me to be present and focused on them. The same thing is true when I'm at work. I am present and focused there. My kids' teachers will tell you, I don't ever answer the phone. They call my husband because they know mom's not going to answer the phone. But again, that's what's great about having a great partner who will do that.
I have kind of a deeper question on gender disparities within medicine. Obviously, we've grown a lot through our education. We've seen a lot of change so far. Do you feel like there has been any sort of gender issues as you were going through medicine? Whether it's been a struggle dealing with other nurses, doctors, other staff, has that been something that you uniquely feel is a woman issue? Or do you think that because the statistics are showing more females are going into medicine and into higher education, that it's actually leveling out across the board?
Ooh, yes and no. I definitely experienced a lot of that. And there is a lot of inherent bias, both in the system in some subspecialties, but also among that healthcare team. The classic example is that I routinely during residency would walk into a room and say, "Hi, I'm Dr. Dhvani." And they'd be on their phone and they'd go, "Gotta go. The nurse just walked in." And I don't mind being called nurse. Nurses are amazing. But also my male colleagues never got mistaken for a nurse. And the male nurses frequently got called doctor. The only reason for that was the gender or the gender that somebody appeared to be. Stuff like that was definitely frustrating. In pediatrics, We used to joke during residency that there were little awards that the nurses could give, and the male residents were always the ones who got them because most of the nurses are female. And it was a running joke, but also very much something that exists. And some of that is just dynamics. And I can say or do the same thing in the same tone that one of my male colleagues would, and I'll get called a bitch or told I'm being not nice, whereas men can say and do a lot more and get along. But again, that exists in society at large. My hope is that it's getting better. I know in pediatrics, we've pretty much for a long time now been majority female, but I do think that we're starting to see more women in leadership positions. We're starting to see some of those shifts happening, though, as I'm sure you guys have maybe even talked about this before. They've also looked at data that subspecialties that tend to be majority female also tend to be the lowest paying ones. And so the gender pay gap is real and kicking, and it is what it is, I guess, till we change it.
How do we change that?
I don't know, man. I went to a really great grand rounds that was given by a speaker, and he was the chair of the Department of Pediatrics, and he talked about the things that they did that were really revolutionary in terms of trying to reduce that gender pay gap. And it was really cool listening to him talk about. Really, I came away with that thinking, oh, okay, so we need the men to step up because the women have been fighting for this for a while, and maybe we just need the guys to champion us too.
It's funny that you share the gender disparity because some of those things also occur in law. Whether you hear a story or whether you've seen it, there are instances in which you have a female attorney who might be a partner, might be an associate, and somebody assumes they are a paralegal or assumes they are an office manager. There are also instances in which the female attorney is the owner of the firm and another male attorney might be in there with her who is an associate, who is one of her employees. And essentially the male associate is being seen as the owner of the firm where a correction needs to take place because of the male-female traditional roles in law and in medicine. When you talked about that, immediately I started thinking back to these stories in which a strong female attorney is put down to a position that is not of her title. Nurses, office managers, paralegals, they all have a function. They're all worth their weight in gold. But there's a certain instance when you're paid to do a job, being given the respect and deference of the title that you've earned and you've worked so hard over the years to gain. And so I see that in both law and medicine.
We're going to take this really, really into an interesting route. You obviously work in pediatrics, and right now in our country, we are dealing with a lot of changes, almost dismantling of the healthcare system, of medicine, but also socioeconomic changes. And you're seeing it at the roots of all of that. What are your thoughts on the changes that we're seeing, and then what are you doing and how are you dealing with it in your day-to-day profession?
That's huge. I think pediatricians, primary care providers, teachers, we are all on the front line when it comes to failed social policies. We see the impacts of food insecurity and poverty and kids who are uninsured, kids who are dying from vaccine preventable illnesses, child abuse. All of these things are fixable issues that unfortunately we just haven't fixed with social policy. It's unfortunate, but I also think that's why it's so important for us as pediatricians to also be advocates. And I think the AAP has done a great job of that. They've done a good job of advocating for kids and fighting some of the things that are going on right now. But our jobs are inherently political, and medicine is inherently political. But it's really important that we all take that seriously and do what we can to make the world better for everybody.
Now, do you think it's the responsibility of the parents, the families, the doctors, or more so on our legislators, our lawmakers to really address those issues?
Both. They do what we pressure them to do. And so we have to bring the heat. I am so grateful that there are so many people who are running for office. There's a pediatrician running for Senate. It's great. People are starting to step up and go, hey, we need to just be the change. And so let's do it. And I think that's great.
I know our viewers probably know this already, but the public in general could do a better job understanding that our goal isn't out there to push an agenda in any way. Our goal is just to make sure that the population that we're dealing with remains healthy and that they have a long and healthy life. And that is so much more important for you as a pediatrician because you are the foundation of our future, the next generation. The only way we move forward as a society is if our children continue to be well and are educated and stay healthy. No matter what our political views are, no matter who walks into our office, we treat them exactly the same, no matter how they treat us, what they say to us. At the end of the day, the recommendations are very similar. Our goals are very similar.
Absolutely. I don't care what your politics are. I just want you to be healthy. And I want all the kids I see to be able to grow and thrive and have stable, supportive, loving environments. That's the goal. And whatever politician can get us there, that's who I want.
There's so many questions that we didn't get to ask you. Obviously, there's other aspects of your career in pediatrics, in being a advocate and really addressing child abuse. You have a lot of working knowledge and applicable knowledge that a lot of people don't really get to see in this day and age. So what's better than having a guest on our podcast that is not only a doctor, but also an educator, somebody that understands how to present the information in a palatable experience to where people can actually take it in and be informed and make the change. But with that, we really appreciate it, Dr. Dhvani. You've been wonderful on our podcast. Do you have any final words for our viewers before we let you go?
Go out and vote and vaccinate your kids.
I agree with both of those sentiments. With that, that is another episode of the Medico-Legal Brief with Dr. Long, Lawyer Nik, and Dr. Dhvani. We appreciate you joining in. If you haven't already, go like, subscribe, and comment. Follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and all the social medias. We have our new episodes airing Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Central Time. We will see you in the comments.
Yes, we're doctors. Yes, we're lawyers. No, this podcast is not medical or legal advice. Do not take anything we say as a reason to perform your own heart surgery, represent yourself in court, or diagnose your neighbor's rash. This is for entertainment only. Think of it like hanging out with your smartest, wittiest friends, not a substitute for an actual appointment. If you act on anything we say without talking to your own professional, that's on you. Seriously, don't do that.